Imagine walking into a casino, right? You don't know the rules of the games, you can't see the dice being rolled, and the house edge is, well, it's entirely determined by what you had for breakfast over the last 2 decades.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a stressful casino.
Right. You just sit down at the table, blindly place your bets, and just hope the dealer doesn't hand you a failing heart.
But the crazy thing is, every single one of us has a seat at that table.
Yeah.
I mean, we are forced to play every single day just by waking up and existing in the modern world.
Exactly. So, our mission for you, listening right now to this deep dive, is to equip you with the actual scientific tools to decode your own cardiovascular health risks. We've got some incredible source material today.
We do, yeah. It really breaks down everything from, the cellular causes of heart disease to the psychological reasons we fail to stop it.
Right, because we want to separate the actual mathematical probabilities from what your brain merely perceives as dangerous.
Yeah.
Because human beings are notoriously profoundly terrible at assessing danger.
Oh, we are walking paradoxes. To protect our hearts, we first have to understand why our internal danger radar is so utterly broken.
Yeah, tell me about the black bag thing.
Okay, so in strict epidemiological science, risk is an emotionally void concept. It's just the mathematical probability that an event will happen. So think of the classic black cloth bag from statistics class.
Yeah, the colored balls.
Exactly. You have 6 colored balls in the bag. You reach in blindly. The probability pulling green ball is exactly 1 in 6, or roughly 16.6%. It's just a fixed objective reality of 0.17.
Right, but reality hits and our brains immediately just throw that objective math out the window. If you look at global data, you have an annual risk of 1 in 5,747 of being killed in a car crash. But for commercial flights, the risk is 1 in about 5 million. The danger of flying is astronomically lower. Yet, millions of people happily jump into their cars every single morning, while needing a sedative just to board a plane.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of perceived risk.
Right.
This source material isn't just biology, it's really a masterclass in human behavior. We drastically underestimate risks if an activity is familiar or if we feel like a false sense of control.
Or if we just like doing it, right?
Exactly. I mean, evolutionarily, we're wired to seek out high-calorie, high-fat foods. And because people enjoy eating them, they naturally minimize the long-term kind of abstract risk of cardiovascular disease in their minds.
It's an automatic defense mechanism. It just grants us permission to keep doing what feels good.
Yeah, and on the flip side, we inflate risks for things we instinctively want to avoid.
Right, like the parent example from the text. Parents might obsess over the extremely low statistical risk of their child wandering off and being abducted. They'll alter their whole lives to mitigate that tiny probability.
While completely ignoring the much higher statistical probability that, the sugary snacks they pack in that kid's lunchbox are actively setting the stage for metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah, if we want an excuse, we shrink the risk. If we want to justify our fears, we inflate it.
And to bypass that flawed human perception, scientists rely heavily on epidemiology, which is, the study of patterns of health and disease across vast populations.
Because atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries, that's a multifactorial disease, right?
Yes, there's no single isolated cause. So epidemiology lets researchers zoom way out, look at massive groups of people, and work backward through all the noise to find the objective risk factors.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because epidemiology forces us to divide these risks into 2 distinct buckets, right? What we can control and what we can't.
Right.
Let's start with the uncontrollable. If genetics is the blueprint of a house, lifestyle is the construction crew. And you can't change the blueprint. The 2 biggest non-modifiable factors are age and gender.
Yeah, as you get older, your blood vessels just naturally undergo structural changes. They lose their elasticity, they narrow slightly from mechanical wear and tear.
But gender dictates a massive divergence early in life, doesn't it?
It really does. Statistically, men under 50 are at a significantly higher risk for cardiovascular disease than women in that exact same age bracket. And this all comes down to estrogen.
Because estrogen isn't just a reproductive hormone, right? It acts as a shield.
Exactly. It's a powerful vasodilator. It promotes the release of nitric oxide in the blood vessels, which keeps the endothelial cells, that's the inner lining of the arteries, flexible and relaxed.
Wow.
It provides this natural biochemical shield against plaque buildup, at least until menopause, when those estrogen levels precipitously drop and women's risk rapidly catches up to men's.
That is so wild. But the most intensely debated non-modifiable factor is always genetics. Like, the source dives into this landmark 1994 Swedish epidemiological study on male twins.
Oh, that study's foundational.
Yeah, researchers found that if one identical twin died of heart disease between 36 and 55, the other twin had an 8 times higher risk of also dying from it.
Right. An eightfold increase is a staggering statistical correlation. It firmly establishes that hereditary factors play a massive role in your baseline vulnerability.
But wait, I have to push back on the framing there. If we're talking about identical twins, they possess the exact same genetic source code. So if cardiovascular disease was purely genetic, wouldn't the risk be like 100% identical?
Yes, exactly. And that
Why did the other twin merely have an elevated risk rather than a guaranteed fate?
because that nuance is the absolute crux of modern epigenetics. It highlights the crucial difference between a genetic link and a genetic guarantee. Even with identical DNA, the specific environments those twins lived in, their habits, their stress dictated how those genes were actually expressed.
Okay, so the genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger.
Exactly. Non-modifiable risk factors merely set the stage. Your genes don't spontaneously tear open an artery in a vacuum. The environment has to provide the building materials for the disease.
Which brings us perfectly to the second bucket, the modifiable risks, the daily conscious choices that directly impact our physical plumbing. And smoking is still one of the worst, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about lung cancer. The thousands of chemicals in tobacco smoke, especially carbon monoxide and nicotine, they cause microscopic damage to that delicate endothelial lining we talked about.
They basically scratch up the Teflon coating of your blood vessels.
That's a perfect way to put it. It creates this rough surface for cholesterol plaques to just snag on and build up. And physical inactivity compounds that damage.
Right, there was that massive Harvard study on inactivity.
Yeah, tracking over 10,000 men.
Hmm.
They showed that subjects who went from completely sedentary to regular exercise lowered their mortality rate by 23%.
Hmm.
Exercise physically conditions the heart and increases the flexibility of the vascular network.
And both smoking and inactivity feed directly into the silent killer, which is high blood pressure or hypertension. Clinically, that's defined as consistently over 140/90. And the mechanical physics of why this destroys the heart is just wild. Because the heart is a pump. If the pressure is too high, blood is forced through the arteries with excessive turbulence.
Right, creating shearing forces.
Yeah, shearing forces that literally tear at the artery walls. The body detects this, rushes to patch it with cholesterol plaques, but patching the wall narrows the tube.
Which forces the pressure even higher. It's a deadly cascading feedback loop. And wheat specifically, obesity aggressively drives that pressure up. For decades, medicine relied on the body mass index, or BMI, to quantify this.
What isn't BMI famously flawed? I mean, anyone who follows sports knows you can take a top Olympic sprinter with huge muscle mass, run their numbers, and they're clinically obese according to BMI.
Totally. The text explicitly points out that BMI has catastrophic limitations because it makes absolutely no allowance for body composition. It fails to differentiate between lean muscle and fat.
Right.
And more importantly, it fails to identify where that fat is located, which is why the standard has shifted toward the waist-to-hip ratio.
How do you measure that?
You measure the waist circumference just above the navel and divide it by the hips. A ratio greater than 0.9 for men or 0.85 for women strongly indicates visceral obesity.
But wait, why does the physical location of the fat matter so much? Isn't fat just stored energy?
So, subcutaneous fat, the fat under your skin on your thighs or arms, is relatively inert. But visceral fat, the fat packed deep inside your abdomen around your liver and pancreas, that is biologically active.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, it functions almost like an alien endocrine organ. It constantly pumps inflammatory cytokines directly to the liver. This kicks off systemic inflammation, aggressively accelerating the hardening of the arteries. It's really about the metabolic hostility of where you carry the fat.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because protecting your heart isn't just about minimizing visceral fat. It's about exactly what is in your blood.
Right, the microscopic chemistry.
Yeah, and this is where the scientific consensus has evolved rapidly and honestly confusingly. We have to talk about lipoproteins. Because cholesterol isn't just one uniform thing.
Right. Cholesterol is a lipid, meaning it's fat-soluble. Blood is mostly water. Oil and water don't mix.
Naturally.
So for cholesterol to travel through your blood, the liver packages it inside protein shells called lipoproteins. The main ones are low-density lipoproteins, or LDLs, and high-density lipoproteins, HDLs.
And LDLs are traditionally cast as the villains, right? These come from saturated fats, fats solid at room temp, like butter. They deliver cholesterol to cells, but when there are too many, they leave cholesterol behind to form artery plaques.
Exactly. Whereas HDLs from unsaturated fats like olive oil serve the opposite function. They act as scavengers, absorbing excess cholesterol and taking it back to the liver to be destroyed. Ideally, you want a ratio of about 3:1 LDL to HDL.
But I want to bring up this massive contradiction from the text that confused everyone. For decades, we were told saturated fats directly cause fatal heart disease. But recently, a massive meta-analysis of 72 studies suggested diets high in saturated fats might not be directly linked to increased cardiovascular diseases.
Yeah, and the public felt completely betrayed by that.
Totally. So why does that happen?
Well, it raises a critical point about evaluating scientific studies. You have to look at validity, precision, reliability. In nutritional epidemiology, isolating a single factor like saturated fat is incredibly hard because people eat complex meals, not isolated macronutrients.
The vitamin C debate from the source perfectly illustrates this, actually. In 1997, a major Finnish study tracked men and found those with the lowest vitamin C had a 13.2% heart attack rate.
Compared to only 3.8% in men with high vitamin C.
Right. So based on that one finding, a massive supplement industry exploded. People thought they could just swallow a pill to armor plate their hearts.
But then,
Fast forward to a 2016 metadata study, and they found absolutely zero cardiovascular benefit to taking isolated vitamin C supplements. None.
right, and this isn't science failing, this is science refining itself. The 1997 study found a valid correlation. But the vitamin C wasn't the magic bullet. It was just a biomarker for a healthy lifestyle.
Because people eating vitamin C were eating fresh fruits, exercising, getting fiber.
Exactly. When you isolate one chemical from that biological synergy and put it in a pill, the protective effect vanishes. One study is never enough.
So when the public health advice is confusing and we remain, stubbornly attached to our bad habits, what happens when the plumbing actually fails?
That's when we rely on medical interventions. Modern medicine attacks it from multiple angles. We use antihypertensives to physically drop the pressure. Diuretics flush out fluid, beta blockers slow the heart down, ACE inhibitors keep vessels wide open.
And we also use anticoagulants to stop blood from clotting around plaques. And the text notes, one of the most famous ones, is warfarin, which, and this is wild, was historically used as rat poison.
It is wild. It blocks vitamin K. In a rat, a high dose causes fatal internal hemorrhaging. But in a human patient, a tiny monitored dose just slightly thins the blood so it slips past those narrow plaques without clotting.
That's terrifying but amazing. The titans of the space, though, are statins.
Absolutely. Statins block an enzyme in the liver called HMG-CoA reductase, stopping it from making cholesterol. The data is staggering. There's a U.S. study on Asian Indians who have a high genetic risk.
Right.
The placebo group had a 15.5% risk of a heart attack over 5 years. The statin group, it plummeted to 11.8%.
Which is a massive absolute risk reduction from just a daily pill. But pushing back here, if statins are this magic bullet, can I just take a pill in the morning and go eat trans fats all day?
No. Biology and psychology both prevent that. Biologically, statins have side effects, severe muscle inflammation, potential liver toxicity.
Right.
But psychologically, they create a devastating false sense of security. It's called risk compensation. People get the pill and abandon their healthy habits. But a statin cannot repair the endothelial damage from high blood pressure or undo the insulin resistance from a terrible diet.
To see what happens when all these variables collide on a massive scale, the text brings up the Middle East. Heart failure onset there is happening a full 10 years earlier than in Western nations.
Yeah, the 2014 Dubai Health Survey showed 30% of all deaths in the UAE were cardiovascular. Massive spikes in diabetes and obesity.
How does a whole region shift that drastically that fast?
Rapid urbanization. They went through a massive shift to affluent, hyper-sedentary lifestyles almost overnight. Manual labor was replaced by automated environments, driving replaced walking, and energy-dense food became cheap and everywhere. The environment changed, but human biology didn't.
Wow. So we've decoded how probability tricks our brains. We've looked at the mechanical wear and tear of our arteries and seen how science constantly tests its own assumptions.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the data shows that intellectual knowledge is just not enough. People know smoking and bad diets are lethal. But they do it anyway, because the perceived immediate dopamine reward almost always overrides the abstract mathematical probability of dying in a decade.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a really provocative reality to chew on. If our evolutionary drive for high-fat foods and relaxation is so deeply hardwired into our DNA that even the literal threat of early death doesn't stop us, maybe the future of fighting cardiovascular disease isn't happening in a lab.
Right.
Maybe it's not about better pills or scarier warning labels. Maybe the real solution requires entirely redesigning our cities and our food systems so that the healthy choice is no longer a conscious choice you have to actively make, but just simply the default way we live.